Well, it's great to be with you together again this morning as we conclude our series looking at Paul's letter to the Philippian church. We've entitled this series A Life That Revolves Around Jesus. And throughout this series we've been looking at how Paul has been writing to this church to encourage them and us to live a life that revolves around Jesus. There's a new dynamic relationship that we have with God. A new dynamic relationship with others. And it brings us into a new peace as we're able to be confident in God's love for us. So this life that revolves around Jesus Paul has been showing us how all this fits together. And this new life that revolves around Jesus actually impacts every aspect of our lives. And so as we look to the last one in our series, I want to look at what Paul says about a new dynamic relationship that we have with money and with wealth. Paul, in the part of the letter we're looking at today, he describes this new relationship as entering into a partnership of giving and receiving. So let's look at the passage. Let's read the passage this morning. Philippians 4, verses 10 to 19. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Yet it was kind of you to share my trouble. And you Philippians yourselves know that in the beginning of the gospel, when I left Macedonia, no church entered into partnership with me in giving and receiving except you only. Even in Thessalonica, you sent me help for my needs once and again. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that increases to your credit. I have received full payment and more. I am well supplied, having received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent. A fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God. And my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. To our God and Father be glory forever and ever. Amen. On Friday it was our wedding anniversary, and can you guess what I brought Susie as a present? In fact, actually, I think we could use up the whole time of this preach if I actually allowed you to try and guess, because I don't think you'll guess it. I actually bought her a hedgehog box. Now, Susie doesn't really need a hedgehog box, but I know her. We've been married now for 27 years, and I know that she would love to have a hedgehog box, even though she doesn't really need it. And it can be a bit like this, can't it, with our presents, our birthday presents and Christmas presents? Especially if it's a surprise. It may not be something we actually need, but you're thankful because you know that the person giving the present has spent time thinking about you, has spent time thinking this person would love this. They've been thinking about what they can give you. And so when you receive it, you are grateful, you are thankful, even though you may not necessarily need it. And Paul, in this letter, has received a gift from the church in Philippi. He's received a gift of money, and he says, actually, I don't need this gift. I don't really need it because I'm not in need. I'm not talking about need, but I'm so grateful to you. I see your kindness in the gift that you have given to me, and I receive it with real sort of a grateful and thankful heart, even though I don't need it. Why does he say this? I think he says this because he's discovered a new dynamic in a relationship with money. This dynamic of being able to give and receive in equal measure. Even though maybe he doesn't need it, he still recognises that they're giving it. And he receives this gift with a thankful heart. Paul says that this key to this new dynamic relationship of being able to give and receive in partnership is down to being content. Content with what you have. I don't know what it means for you to be content. Maybe for you it's that feeling of security. I have enough to meet my needs. I don't have to worry about where my next meal is coming from. We often think that peace and contentment comes from that, being secure in our finances, being secure in our money. Our aim, our ambition in that case is therefore to have more than we need because we want to feel comfortable, we want to feel safe and secure. That sense of saving up for a rainy day. We all want that sense of it, don't we? But how much then do we actually need? Is what I have sufficient? Do I need more? What if this happens? What if that happens? Gosh, I actually need more than I need. I need more. I need to get more. I need to obtain more. So what sets out as the idea that this is what makes us comfortable and content and happy actually becomes a source of anxiety for us and not contentment, because we're never sure if we have enough. We're never content with what we've got because we always think we might need a bit more. Jim Carrey, the actor, very, very famous actor, different films, he says this, he was quoted as saying this: "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer." And Paul himself, he knows the danger that a desire for wealth can bring. He warns a good friend of his, Timothy, in a letter he wrote to them in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 7 to 10. He writes this, he says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs." The writer of another letter called Hebrews says a similar thing. He says this in Hebrews 11 verse 13 verse 5, "Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said," talking about Jesus, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." It's important to note here that Paul is not putting a value statement on being poor or being wealthy. He's not saying that poverty is a good thing and that the poor are somehow specially righteous. He's not saying that wealth is a good thing, that being wealthy is somehow a sign that God is blessing you in particular. But he is recognising that both exist, and that in both situations this desire for money, whether to escape poverty or whether to protect our wealth, is a danger, and that being content in all circumstances is really being free from this love of money. So how can we avoid this love of money? Well, Paul says, actually, I've discovered a secret. I've discovered a secret of how to be content with plenty and with nothing, in need and abundance. I've learned a secret. He has a secret. So often the mantra of our society today is that you can do anything if you put your mind to it. It's just a matter of having the right attitude. And there are numerous, aren't there, self-help books and self-promoting conferences that say you can achieve contentment, you can achieve satisfaction, you can achieve greatness if you put these steps into action. If you follow these 7 steps, these four rules, you will find contentment. You will have earned it. You will have deserved it because you've worked hard to achieve it. Because we all want, don't we, the secret to contentment, the secret to success and happiness. But Paul says this secret is not down to our own achievement, not down to our own effort. He's saying it comes from a life that revolves around Jesus. He says in chapter 4, verse 13, which we've just read out, he says that he can do all things through him, that's talking about Jesus again, who strengthens him, even facing plenty and hunger. I don't know where you look to find strength and encouragement, but Paul says for him, it's a life that revolves around Jesus. It's a life that knows about the good news of Jesus, that is built upon understanding who Jesus is and what he's done. It helps Paul to handle lack of money and wealth, and it helps Paul to handle an abundance of money and wealth. Why? Because he knows that the gospel, believing in Jesus, living a life that revolves around Jesus, is expressing a complete dependence on Jesus for all our needs. Contentment doesn't come from the comfort of having wealth and therefore the desire to have more, but comes from knowing the truth about the gospel, the truth about Jesus who can strengthen us in all circumstances. Because the gospel is not about what we deserve, but what we don't deserve. We don't deserve the love of God. We don't deserve the forgiveness of sin. And yet God chooses to love us. God chooses to forgive us our sin by giving his Son to us. This is why Paul can be content in having plenty and little, because he knows that with plenty he can give, and in need he can still be thankful for what he already has in Jesus Christ. But it's not just about having that life that revolves around a relationship with God. Paul also understands that to have this contentment is not just an instant thing. Because Paul says he has learnt this secret. He has learned the secret of what it is to be content in plenty and in need. And this word learn in Greek is mathano. It means, yes, to study. It means to be instructed in. But it also means to develop a good habit. It also means to practice. It also means to have learnt things through developing a custom and an understanding and a comprehension through doing. So it's not just a matter of an instant download, for example. We don't just get contentment in all financial circumstances by some download. It's not like, here is your contentment in financial circumstances app. Click here for abundance, click here for need. And there you have all the contentment you need from your phone or from your iPad or from whatever device that you're plugging into. It's not that instant download. It comes from practicing and developing. It comes from practicing and developing a habit of giving. It comes from giving regularly where you have plenty or little. In verse 15 and 16 of the passage we'll be looking at today, Paul writes, "And you, Philippians, yourselves know that in the beginning of the gospel, when I left Macedonia, no church entered into partnership with me in giving and receiving, except you only. Even in Thessalonica, you sent me help for my needs once and again." The gift that Paul has received from the Philippians is not a one-off. It's not the first time. It has come out of a long-term habit of providing for Paul on his journeys to bring the good news of Jesus to others. And his letter to the Corinthian church, Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 11, 9-12. He says, "Did I commit a sin in humbling myself so that you might be exalted because I preached God's gospel to you free of charge? I robbed other churches by accepting support from them in order to serve you. And when I was with you and was in need, I did not burden anyone, for the brothers who came from Macedonia, which is where Philippi is, supplied my need. So I refrained and will refrain from burdening you in any way." He rebukes the church in Corinth, saying he didn't burden them for money because actually he didn't need to. The church in Macedonia, this Philippian church who we've been looking at over the last few weeks, has supplied him time and time again in order that he can complete his mission of bringing the good news to Corinth. So the gift that the Philippian church has been giving right from the beginning of Paul's journey from Macedonia, from where he met the Philippians. It's been an ongoing partnership of giving to Paul and Paul receiving so that he can go on and spread the good news of Jesus in new and new environments and new places and to new people. Paul starts his letter to the Philippians in chapter 1 verse 5 by recognising that the church in Philippi was actually in partnership with Paul in the gospel. And at the end of the letter he's saying that this partnership is shown through the way the church has generously given right from the beginning. So for Paul and for us, partnering in giving and receiving, this new dynamic of how we relate to money and wealth is partnering in the gospel. And we are part of New Frontiers, a family of churches that are on mission together, partnering together in the gospel to see churches planted in new areas so the good news of Jesus can be brought to many people who don't yet know him and who have not heard about him. And as a church, we give regularly to this work. So from what the church here receives from you, we give to other churches that are just starting. We could just keep this money. We could just hold on to it, pay off our mortgages, increase my salary, increase Matt's salary, increase Nev's salary, increase Nick's salary. We could do that. But we don't. We choose to, out of what we receive, to give, because we know we're partnering with other churches, new churches that are just starting, who don't have the resources, but who are keen to bring the good news of Jesus to others. So we are partnering in receiving and giving, and we're partnering in the gospel as we receive the money that you give us, and we give out to New Ground and New Frontiers and the family of churches that we're part of. So we need to learn to practice how we live in need and abundance. In abundance, we need to be content and realise we have more than we need, and to practice giving out of that. In need, we need to practice being content with what we have. As Paul said, we have clothes, we have food. What more do we need? We need to be content with that. We need to trust that God will provide for those things we need. And then seeing how we can be thankful for what we have got, and how we can even give from the little that we have been given. Over my 30 years of being a Christian, I've had to learn how to give. It's been a practice. It's been 30 years of lessons in giving, lessons in how to be content with some money and little money. And it's still an ongoing thing. I've developed good habits and regular habits of giving regularly out of what I got. But there have been moments when I have had a promotion at work, I've changed a job, and I've received a considerable increase in my salary. And initially I would think, wow, that's brilliant. You know, I can do this now. I can buy this now. We can plan to do that. We can plan to have a fantastic holiday somewhere. And yet over time, I've learned to realise that actually I can take a moment to stop and think, you know what, this has been God has blessed me with this. But I just need to think, how can I give? I've received this amazing gift. I don't necessarily deserve it. It's just come because of my circumstances have changed. But it also means that now I can give. I can give a little bit more to others out of what I've received. But then there have also been moments when through, again, maybe changes of job, different circumstances, being led into different things, I've also experienced a sudden drop in my income. And at those moments, you sort of catch your breath and think, oh my goodness, how are we going to survive? I've been used to having all this money. What's going to happen now? I haven't got all this money coming in. And again, over periods of time, I've learned that actually, you know what, God will provide. I just have to maybe adapt and learn how to live with what I've got, to be content with what I have. But also, I can still be giving out of what has been given to me. It may not be as much as before, but I can still give. And so that's led into a practice and a habit of learning to give, learning to receive what God gives me, whatever that is, and to be content in that, and then to be giving out of that. It's an amazing partnership that we enter with God when we have a relationship with Jesus. The things He gives us more than we need, and yet He encourages us to give out of what He's given us, especially our finances. Are you overly anxious about the state of your finances? Have you found yourself in a position where you have made some bad choices to secure money or wealth? Maybe you've stopped being thankful for what God has given you. Come to God. Ask Jesus to help and strengthen you through these situations. Maybe you need to start to develop a habit or practice of giving. A very helpful way is every time you receive something is to just stop and think, who can I give something to? If you receive a regular income, think about how you could give regularly, particularly to the church. You can go to our website. On there are practical ways of how to give regularly, how to set up standing orders, etc., that you can give regularly out of what you give. Another very practical way is our next gift day that's coming up in November. There will be a Sunday in November where we'll be focusing on the partnership and relationship we have with the New Frontiers family of churches. And after that, we'll be having gift days. And those gift days are to, yes, help us pay off the mortgage on the building that we have. But out of that, we also choose to give 10% of that to the work of New Ground. So that's another way of maybe over the next few weeks, just be thinking about how you can partner in receiving and giving in this way towards our gift days. So maybe you just need to speak to someone you trust in the church who can encourage and help you. Someone who you can ask and say, how do you handle money and wealth? Maybe you don't yet know Jesus. Maybe your life doesn't yet revolve around this wonderful Son of God, the gift God has given us. You've not yet received him into your life. And so you are full of anxiety and worry. You don't know the goodness of Jesus. You don't know the contentment of knowing Jesus is with us. You don't know the goodness of the gospel, that God said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And maybe you need to start to develop into that relationship. Join us on Alpha. It's a great way to start to get to know Jesus and to see how he's impacted others' lives. Please go to our website again and sign up on there. And as we do all this, as we challenge ourselves and develop a life around Jesus that develops good habits of receiving and giving money and wealth, as we enter into this wonderful partnership of giving and receiving, as we are strengthened by Jesus to be content in all situations. Amen.